'Twas but a 10 of hearts that wrested the beach away from its illusory peace and grandeur. Humans so fickle, frail, and ever close with death, went a frenzy as the games began. They rampaged hall by hall, tearing brethren limb from limb. Fear and evil ran amok as the lambs prayed to survive, while wolves preyed on those prayers. But then, what's this? There was this man, Chishiya, just standing there amid the chaos, looking out over it as the beach descended ever happy into violent revelry. He wasn't surprised, shaken, or seemingly even worried despite being trapped in an olio of murder, madness, and mayhem. But why? Why the calm? Why the patience? Why the peace among blood spilling everywhere? Hello and welcome back to another episode of Generation Ochi. My name is American Ben. Today we look into the mind of Shuntaro Chishiya in the hopes of gaining just maybe a semblance of an understanding of his enigmatic mind. Some would say he is by nature cruel, but here will I challenge that notion and aver instead that his ruthlessness is but nurtured in him. We first met Chishiya during the tag game early on in Alice in Borderland. He wasted no time heading directly up to the 7th floor, the highest floor in the building, before declaring, We could see already that he is a careful thinker. He plans his moves and not necessarily in accordance with the majority. He doesn't fall for the trappings of human bias in the way other participants do, as we discussed in the video we did on the 7 of Hearts game. He doesn't automatically assume that sticking together or working as a team will help him, especially not in a spades game, one involving physical prowess. He went to the top of the building because the tagger would most likely find that to be an inconvenient location to travel up to, and of course, also so he could look over the entire arena and gauge his surroundings. Yes, Chishiya is a deep thinker. He seems almost callous about human life. Well, he is to an extent. He is clearly desensitized to death due to his state of being in Borderland, but there's also some sarcasm, maybe even cynicism in his voice. See, it's not that he lusts for death or even enjoys it. He understands it. He accepts death as a fact. He does not live in denial of it. This is what deep thinking begets. If one thinks deep enough, that is. If not, then deep thinking can actually stir in the mind great anxiety. It's only when you hit a point of enlightenment that death ceases to cast the mind to toil. So okay, he's a deep thinker who's in touch with his state of being. But what is he thinking about? What is his philosophy? Well, it's quite clear that he has developed a dark view of human nature. Here, Arisu yelled to the participants to inform them of the location of the tagger, and he suggested that they should all take turns sharing his location and search for the safe zone as a group. And what did Chishiya think about that idea? He didn't think it would work. Not because it couldn't, but because he believes that people are too selfish, too self-concerned to achieve this kind of collective action. Making noise gives away one's location, and so rather than help the entire group, an individual will simply do what they think is best for themselves. Even if helping the group would help the individual in the end, that's not what the person under threat senses. I wouldn't advise picking Chishiya for team games. He's more of a golfer, though perhaps he's not one for club games either. One thing you have to understand in regards to Chishiya's philosophy vis-a-vis Borderland is that not long after the tag game, he discovered that there are humans overwatching the games. And given that he has a dark view of humanity, obviously this knowledge was going to strongly affect his decisions moving forward. He cannot trust the game masters to provide for victimless solutions. No, someone like Chishiya who has a Hobbesian view of human nature is always going to be thinking and planning ahead, because obviously he cannot trust others, and thus he must always be prepared. I probably should have mentioned earlier another reason he went to the top of the building in the tag game was simply to steer clear of other players for a certain amount of time. He most likely knew that at first the participants would likely stumble in trying to figure out what to do, and in doing so, might make critical mistakes. So he stayed out of the way, let the others err, and then as soon as he was able to determine what to do, he got moving. Because after all, he was forced to do something in the game. He can't just rely on others to solve the games on their own. 'Tis the bane of intelligence, I suppose. You'll note that just before the tag game began, when the participants were waiting in a sort of game lobby, Chishiya was careful to stay quiet and out of the way of everyone else. He was almost purposely trying to signal to others not to engage him. He didn't want to allow himself to fall prey to his own human weakness. If he spoke to the people there, then he would have put himself in a position to be read or used. Even if he thinks he's smarter than everyone else and more ahead of the game, so to speak, he is wise enough to know that he can still get beat if he trusts. Best to not open up and instead remain reclusive. This is the first nod to his true nature, which I think is friendly. He cannot let his natural amiability subvert his survivability. Chishiya's forward thinking and planning came to a head at the beach, where he devised a plan to steal the playing cards and then abscond with Kuina in the hopes of eventually escaping Borderland entirely. And of course, the cunning among plotters will adeptly employ manipulation in order to carry out their plans successfully.
アリス君、ウサギちゃんと2人で随分情報収集してるみたいだけど。
He decided to drag Arisu into his plans under the guise that he was doing so because Arisu is talented. And actually that was probably at least part of the reason. However, the main reason he chose him was because he determined that Arisu is a good-hearted and trusting individual. This is someone thus who can be tricked and used. To Chishiya, compassion is weakness. Chishiya believes that it's people like Arisu who die in Borderland, and so too society at large. You can't be nice to everyone. You have to do what's necessary to survive.
君はこの絶望しかない世界でどう生きる？どう？
Arisu was almost shocked by this question. People don't often think about such things as the nature of despair. I mean, they may know they're in despair when they are, but Chishiya thinks about what that means. He fully grasps the abominability of their situation. Mired in death, forced to subsist in fear among monsters, forced to compete in constant death games. Chishiya confronted Arisu with this problem to challenge him, to make him conscious of it, and thus force him to recognize the stakes of his situation, and perhaps he would thus, in desperation, be more inclined to listen to Chishiya. And Chishiya did make a very persuasive offer.
現状を一発で変える方法があるとしたらどうする？
He implied that they can in fact leave the beach and yet still escape Borderland. Later, Arisu actually says to Usagi,
危険すぎる。見つかれば殺される。
現状を変えるにはこれしかない。
Was it the only way though? Hard to say, but nonetheless, Chishiya got into his head. Now, why was Chishiya so eager to get away from the beach? Well, this is more foresight on his part.
ロシアがアグニたち武闘派を抑えてはいるが、もうその抑えも効かなくなってきている。
Chishiya realized that the militant faction of beach executives led by Naragi and Aguni would soon take the beach. He has an understanding of security dilemmas and game theory. He is a natural political scientist in a way. There were no checks and balances on power at the beach, and thus it was an atmosphere ripe for a strong-armed tyrant to rise. Hatter simply wasn't offering enough in terms of safety and other benefits to keep people acquiescent to him. Chishiya realized, however, that under the militants, the beach would fall into disarray because Hatter wasn't just a mad king, he knew how to manipulate the emotions of the people and keep them quelled, and he wasn't excessively violent either. He kept the beach a happy and safe enough place. Under military rule, that stood to change, and what use would Chishiya have then? Nonetheless, of course, Chishiya's spiel to Arisu was intended to trick him. Chishiya framed Arisu for trying to steal the cards. He never wanted to gain Arisu's trust, he wanted to gain Aguni's. Again, Chishiya knew Hatter's fall was coming, and when it finally did, he needed to make sure he was on Aguni's good side as to not be killed by Naragi or even Aguni himself. He also, of course, needed a reason to be in the royal suite to figure out where the cards were kept. And indeed, he was able to ascertain their location by observing Aguni's body language.
でも微動だにしないアグニがチラチラとある方向を見ていた。
Chishiya is many steps ahead of everyone else. He also goes on to tell Kuina, his partner in crime, that he doesn't know if Arisu is clever or stupid.
アリス君も頭がいいんだか悪いんだか普通のセキュリティボックスに入れるわけないよね
He didn't know him well enough at that point to judge his intelligence. It was simply Arisu's trusting nature that Chishiya preyed upon. Chishiya knows how to spot weaknesses in people and seize upon them.
そろそろ飽きる頃じゃない弱い者いじめするのも
どこに隠れてた
He knew just how to poke and get to Naragi, who was an insecure bully. Actually, it was as if Chishiya was slowly chipping away at him in all of their interactions, slowly, ever so slowly taking psychological hold of him.
チシヤてめえまた小バカにしやがって
だってバカだろ
Now, why would he do that? Why would he call Naragi stupid? Well, he knew he couldn't show fear to Naragi. That would have emboldened Naragi, given him the fulfillment he wanted. Instead, Chishiya never broke his stoic disposition and projected complete fearlessness around him.
アグニがリーダーに賛成大事な賛成票を失っちゃっていいの
This probably drove the insecure Naragi absolutely mad, confused him, and ultimately led him to falter in their final showdown.
ここで決着つけようじゃねえか
Of course, it was also no coincidence that Chishiya came to confront Naragi during the Ten of Hearts game rather than the other way around.
魔女が俺だって話なら悪いけど違うぜ
主電源の管理等の情報を知っているのは幹部クラスの人間たち
First, as he said, he thought the witch might be one of the executive members. However, I think he more just wanted to rile Naragi up with that insinuation and his ensuing threat. The real reason that I think he went after Naragi was so he could find Naragi before Naragi found him. This way he could prepare his approach and stand a chance to emerge victorious. So given all of his callous actions, you're probably waiting for me to explain how Chishiya isn't cruel, as I hinted I would do back in the beginning of this video. Well, here's the thing. He is cruel, but not by nature, as I also said earlier. We have to separate Chishiya's actions from his nature, because Chishiya is very rational, or at least he forces himself to be rational.
あの子をそのために利用したってこと？
何かを手に入れるためには何かを失う
Chishiya's sacrifice of Arisu is simply a rational decision. He does not believe that everyone in Borderland can be saved. On the contrary, many will die. Some games are set up so that no matter the outcome, someone will die. Thus, he's adapted to this fact, and now works to save himself because that's the most that one can hope to do.
まあ生贄みたいなもんだよよくあるでしょ
ないから全然ない
One must trade others' lives in order to survive in Borderland. There's no choice. Kuina then says,
あんたみたいな人マジで敵に回したくないわ
the same thing that Arisu said earlier.
あんただけは敵に回したくない
What Kuina doesn't realize is that everyone is Chishiya's enemy, or rather everyone is at risk of being used by Chishiya. As a matter of fact, he is using Kuina, just as he did Arisu. If you watched the video we did on Kuina, then you know that she is empathetic and compassionate. Chishiya knows this, and uses her goodness to his advantage. He doesn't keep seedy, untrustworthy people around him. That would ultimately serve to be his undoing. And as soon as it benefits him to kill her, he may do so. Kuina's conscience came into play once again just as she and Chishiya were about to leave the beach with the playing cards.
なんかかわいそうじゃないアリス
She was haunted by the prospect of living with Arisu's blood on her hands. But how did Chishiya respond?
生き残るためにしちゃいけないことなんてあるの
Again, survival was at stake here, and only the fittest survive in Borderland. If there was an option that would allow everyone to be saved, then fine, Chishiya wouldn't have been opposed to it. But if not, then to Chishiya, there's no point in getting everyone killed. If someone is going to die, then let it be someone else instead of you or both of you.
そんなに心配ならクイナが助けに行けば
See, he's just being honest. He called Kuina's bluff. Don't get me wrong, she did feel bad in that moment, but ultimately her priority is herself, just like it is for everyone else. If she's dead, she can't be around to feel bad anyway, right? See, any action that causes one's own death is the most irrational action possible. Because if you die, then you don't exist, and thus can gain nothing, because there is no one there to gain anything. Thus, avoiding death should be everyone's top priority in Chishiya's eyes. And according to him, ultimately this is how everyone will act, save for the Usagis and Arisus of the world who are irrationally selfless. Kuina also struggled to observe the murderous behavior of beach members once the Ten of Hearts game began.
やだね。ここまでしていきたいものかね。
Chishiya was proving a point here. The way things unfolded at the beach should not be a surprise to anyone. This is how humans act when the social contract collapses. They become beasts. We should think of Chishiya's Machiavellian scheming not as a product of his nature, but as a product of him reacting to human nature. He's smart enough to have insight, to be empathetic, but because he has been a constant witness to the darker side of human nature, he's formed a dark view of humanity and adapted his behaviors accordingly, and certainly adapted them in accordance with the rules of Borderland. At the end of the first season, he and Kuina ran into Arisu and Usagi at the abandoned game manager hub in the subway station.
君たちのおかげで絵札以外全てのカードが手に入った。ありがとう。
To me, what stood out about this scene is that after nearly getting Arisu killed, Chishiya acted as if nothing happened. That's the thing, his tactics are nothing personal. And if you were to screw him over, though he wouldn't like it, he'd understand it. He's just practical. Now let's jump back to the scene with him and Kuina by the beach's exit. Note how he stopped Kuina from walking through the gateway and leaving the beach, which had unbeknownst to them been transformed into a game zone.
出るな。
Chishiya seemed rather worried for Kuina there, almost as if he didn't want her to walk out of the game and be killed instantly. Perhaps Chishiya has let Kuina get to him. Perhaps he cares about her, doesn't want her to die. Something that may indeed prove fateful later if at some point it would behoove him to sacrifice her, though I have no knowledge of the manga, so I don't know if such an issue will ever arise. Nonetheless, this is who I think he is by nature. He's caring, empathetic, perhaps even prone to love. It's the world that has tainted him. Also note that back during the tag game, he displayed a fear of death.
備えあれば憂いな。
He also wants very badly to escape Borderland, always a good sign that someone's humanity still persists. See, between his care for Kuina and his fear of death, Chishiya, no matter how rational he may be, cannot overcome his humanness. He may have taught his brain to think emotionlessly, but given his nature, he cannot fully divorce himself from his feelings. If Chishiya is this terrible human being, then why is he such a beloved character? Are we all just ruthless sociopaths? No, of course not. We sense the goodness in him. And though I don't want to overstate the case by declaring him a tender-hearted angel, we can sense his kindly nature and, dare I say, his relative normalness among the heathens of Borderland. Chishiya feels safe. He feels kind of real. Deep thinking is Chishiya's best tool. He's highly intelligent, and unless he bangs his head against a wall hundreds of times for years, nothing is going to change that. However, a powerful mind can be a daunting obstacle for its wielder. When you can't stop thinking, sometimes you overthink, and despite intending to land on truth, you end up drawing some misguided conclusions about the world and the people in it. Chishiya is victim to this. It must be very lonely up there in his thoughts. He has no one to turn to for wisdom in Borderland, and no one smart enough to think him out of his own thoughts. He thus must prevent himself from becoming his own worst enemy. At least now in the presence of Arisu and Usagi, if he sticks with them, he will get the chance to spend some time observing the better side of human nature, and hopefully this will have an effect on him, and perhaps bring out the better Chishiya. For now though, he'll remain stoic amidst the madness, there, out of view, but watching, planning, thinking, knowing, ever ready, and always ahead of the game. And that is our look into the mind of Chishiya. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments down below what you agree with, what you disagree with. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell. We need you on board. For now, my name is American Ben. I'll catch you next time. Generation Ochi, peace.